Pastor, we gotta get you a backdrop just to make it, like a blue screen or something.
I'm just saying.
All right, we are on. We're live. They can hear you, but all right. Um, Let me just make sure we're on here. There we go. There we go. We're live, and folks, we want to give just people a little bit of time to get on. Um, that one was 4 hours ago. Okay, there we go. There we go. We're on. And if you don't mind, what I'm going to do, I always do this. I always share it to my personal page, just so that people will, um, they got to be excited about what I'm excited about. So just let me. I'm going to look at R.P.C. TV page. Oh, okay. Let me just get that going.
Latoya, are you at work?
No, not this
Oh,
week. I'm on call next weekend, so I'll be there next week.
okay. I just see the
Yeah, I
whiteboard
this is
behind you.
my I have like a board behind me from my own home office situation.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, we're on. Well, let me start off by saying happy Sabbath. We wanted to continue this conversation that we had earlier. And I thought it was so fitting for worship to have this kind of talk during worship. So many times we have our nuggets, so to speak, and we don't realize how important it is to continue the dialogue, even when we study the Bible. And we hear it from the top or from the head, from the head. Um, Sometimes you just want to ask the questions. You want to get a better understanding of what's going on. Just today, as my wife is preparing food right now, we're about to eat, okay, and we're just talking about some of the things that we learned. I did not know that you can be doing more harm wearing gloves. I just did not know that. And what my understanding also was that when I'm wearing a mask to protect somebody else because I don't know what I have. And then another thing that was really, I believe, important for me was the very fact that we're able, the what do you call it? The airborne, it being airborne or surface or what have you. I would definitely like to see that being put up again, just for an understanding of what that might look like sometime during the dialogue. We only have until 4:30. We have something else coming up at 5 o'clock. We want to prepare everyone for that. But we have a couple of questions that have come up, at least 4 or 5 questions that have come up, and I was able to locate three of them, but we can start from there. And for those who may have any other questions, you can go to our, of course, if you're watching from our Restoration Praise Center uh, page, Facebook page, you can ask the questions there. I'll be monitoring it there. You can also go to rpctv.tv and I can also monitor it there, those questions also. So I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to answer some of the questions. Of course, we do recognize that it's not so many people may be on as before, but when we put this in the dialogue also, or in there, they can listen to the dialogue and become informed even more about about the COVID-19 the best way we can. Let's bow our heads together. Father, again, we come before you thanking you for this opportunity to learn more about this issue. We know that you are in control of everything. And because of that, we have knowledge that comes from you and through our learning. So be with Dr. Newman, be with Dr. Gibbons, be with Sister Latoya Forrester as we talk a little bit about what's next in our lives for our safety, not only for ourselves, but for those whom we love. Be with us, I ask in Jesus' name. Amen. So, Doc, I just wanted to start off with with a question that was given. This one was for Sam. Sam asked this question. I just want to put first names out there. Sam asked this question: if I have asthma, um, Uh, do you think that we should go to the grocery store or other places as of such if you have asthma? That was one of the questions. So I'll let either one of you handle that one. I think Doc. I'll start with Newman, if you don't mind.
All right. Well, not just if you have asthma, but I think we should do our best to stay indoors right now, and stay away from other people, even if you don't have asthma. Reason being, again, many people can be carriers of the virus but remain asymptomatic.
Mhm.
So you want to avoid the grocery store, and not just for your own safety, but also so you don't, to, as they say on the news, flatten the curve, so we're not spreading it to others.
Gotcha.
So, of course, if you have asthma, you are more at risk of having severe complications from the virus. But I would say, other than, going outdoors for exercise, where, that can, you can keep your social distance, going for a run, going for a walk, going for a bike ride. I would try to avoid public places as much as possible to curb the spread of the disease.
When you guys talk about curving the disease, I'm going to tell you, please, I'm layman, okay? So I'm layman. Sometimes I see CNN, I look at some of these things, and I see the curve, and then I see the straight line, and then could you please, one of you, if you could just explain that to us, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Naeem. No problem.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I will, well, yeah, I felt for a long time that was not the best way to present that because I'm sure people are confused about that.
Yeah.
What those graphs are trying to show are the numbers of people who are getting infected over time, and you typically see one big graph, bell curve graph, and what it means is if you look to the left-hand side of the curve, only a few people when it's starting out get the disease, a few people, and then there comes a period where rapidly it increases. And we saw that. We were, for the whole month of, I think it was a full month of February. It took a month for us to get our first 1,000 people infected in the United States, and I
Oh.
believe it was in February. But in the month of March, we had almost 10 times that amount in the same 30-day period.
Mm.
That was going from the low part of that bell curve where only a few people were to where it was swinging up, and a lot of people in a short period of time were getting infected. We're still on that upswing. Some people are starting to say we're beginning to plateau because they're seeing less people being admitted per day, being admitted to the hospital. It's not 100% clear if that's really what's happening or we're just seeing some natural variation. We'll be able to tell at some point, but at some point we will see a leveling off, and then the numbers of people fall probably quickly to a tail at the other end. And that typically what they say, the biggest part of that curve in the middle, that's where 96% of the people come. So what they're trying to do is lower the risk of people who get the disease so that upswing does not go as high. And that essentially means less people will get infected. Sometimes that means it will elongate it out, which means a lower number of people might be infected for a period of time. But essentially what those curves are trying to say is lower the number of people who actually get infected by the disease over time.
Gotcha.
And just to add to that, because in my world we call it the epi curve.
Right.
So when you're doing like an outbreak investigation, maybe in a hospital or even at this national level, you kind of look at that as an epidemiologist to see where you are and when you'll turn the corner as it relates to like your increasing, because the cases will increase, but eventually, as Dr. Gibbons said, that you will come down.
That's
So
right.
that's what we look at to see if all the measures that we're putting in place are actually working.
So how do we know, or what is the guide that says, okay, we can go back to church? Okay, we can forget about the 10 people that you got to be away from, because I remember it was 50 at first. How does the government, how does, I shouldn't even say the government, right? But how do they gauge this? How do they gauge this? Those who are in those leadership, how do they gauge it?
You want to do that, Latoya?
Yeah, and I guess for that, it's very hard for this one. It's absolutely hard to make that call because there's a lot of situations where you have some communities that may be bending that curve and they're going down decreased cases, deaths, etc. But then if you're out and everyone is socializing and not first washing hands, keeping social distance, then you could have an uptick again. So I know in Wuhan, China, just this past week they opened and they're back out and about, but they're also still taking some precautions as it relates to like distancing, also wearing masks, etc., etc. So things will not. I guess people are like, when will we get back to normal? There'll be no sense of normal for COVID, but it's just the government is trying to see, okay, so if we send people back to work, what can we send them back with? Or
Mm,
okay, if we do this, what will this look like? So it's really hard to say what what should come or when it will come, unfortunately, at this point.
I got
I
you.
can add a little bit to that, Pastor. Latoya is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. It is very, very tough, and one of the ways we do to try to figure it out is by using that curve again. If you know how many people are in your population, and you can start to see when it upticks, you can actually calculate how many people have already gotten the disease per day, and based on that curve, how many are likely to get it per day. That's how they initially came up with these numbers of, up to 250,000 people dying, because you can do it for catching disease. You can also do it for those that are dying and follow similar curves. And so you can begin to predict into the future if things stay the same at a national level and the curve stays the same, then this amount of people. So you can say, okay, it's kind of an art, it's kind of science. At this point, X number of people will die. At this point, X number of people will get it, and we can let them go back to work. But the fact of the matter is, we're not one people in one country. We have hotspots here and there, and more. Some people are more susceptible than others, and that's why it makes it so very difficult from a government to say, okay, everybody can go back and it's fine.
I understand. Hey, Dr. Newman, there was another question that I wanted to put forth to you. One of this is talking about allergies, okay? And I know Sister Latoya can probably deal with some of this, but for you, because we talked a lot about our intake and what we're eating, one of the questions that was asked is if you have allergic reactions to foods such as fruits, nuts, and certain meats. This is what is here. Where do we go from there in our diets to help our immune system? That's the question that they asked. Doc?
That's a tough question. If you're allergic to fruits and nuts and meats, you're kind of left with vegetables and starches and whatever fruits you are not allergic to. Again, boosting your immune system is not only food. So your state of mind is one
Mm,
way of boosting the immune system. There's a lot of data out there showing that positive thinking boosts the mind and the state of mind, and negative thinking can depress your immune system and even make you more susceptible to cancers and illness and things like that. So one way of boosting your immune system is just a positive way of thinking and a positive mindset. Now, there's, drinking water is another way, because your body rids itself of toxins through sweating, through urinating, through defecation, breathing. So there's also ways to boost your immune system by what you put into the system and exercising and things like that, ridding your body of toxins.
Yeah, I can add a couple of things to that.
sure.
Naeem is absolutely right. Similarly, exercise. Regular exercise has been shown to be an immune booster. It can help your immune system,
Yeah.
as can lowering stress. Lowering stress in your life. Excessive stress has been shown to inhibit the immune system, as well as lowering stress through a variety of mechanisms, even meditation and the church or regular church attendance to other means of lowering stress can lower boost your immune system. And these things begin to work together, right? So that if you do something that helps to lower your stress or helps you to deal with anxiety now during this time, because people could say, how in the world can I lower my stress? COVID is out there killing all these people. Well, there are things you can do. Regular exercise actually is a mood elevator and can help your body deal more effectively with the stress that's out there. So can meditation, focusing on spiritual aspects of things, can have those effects as well. So all of those can be helpful for your immune system in fighting the disease.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a question from Yolanda. When someone has been removed from a ventilator, does this weaken their lungs, or are there any side effects to that? It's a question that they're asking.
That's a good question. So essentially, a ventilator is for someone. It's when the lungs have been weakened enough that the patient can no longer breathe for themselves. You connect them to a ventilator that breathes for them until they're strong enough to breathe on their own. Some of the side effects of a ventilator can be pneumonia. That's one of the more common side effects because you're putting essentially a foreign body into the airway, so that can increase the risk for pneumonia. But once a patient comes off the ventilator, um, most of the times they are able to do okay as long as their lungs recover enough from whatever the insult was.
Okay. All right. I've got to tell you, I've never, in my line of work, I'm usually brought in when someone is on a ventilator and the family has to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be totally honest with you guys. I don't know the understanding. All I know is that it helps you breathe. Or the way that I'm always brought in at the last minute, it just keeps you alive, so to speak. Um, in light of that, in a situation like this, when someone has the virus and their lungs are not working, up to capacity or what have you, um, is it a death sentence? Is it not a death sentence? Or you understand where I'm coming from? And please, for those who are listening and whatever, I'm speaking from a layman's point of view. I don't think anything. I don't think any question is a dumb question, so to
Right,
speak.
right, right.
So when you hear of someone who's on a ventilator, is that a death sentence? What's the mindset on that?
So maybe I'll start, and then Naeem, you could add to that as well. So it's a complicated question, right? Because typically people, by the time they need ventilators, as Dr. Newman was saying, their lungs can't function for themselves on their own. That's typically not a good thing, but sometimes it happens as an occurrence of operations or other things that that it's going to happen that way. In the case of COVID, we find some things that are very interesting. It's not a death sentence in the sense to say every single person that gets put on a ventilator, they're going to die. As you might remember, some very prominent cases in the news, Boris
Johnson.
Boris Johnson from the UK. He was put on a ventilator this past week. He's now off the ventilator and doing better. So people can recover from being on a ventilator. It is true, though, what we also find two things. Being on a ventilator for a long period of time, months and months and months, can be very damaging to the lungs. Typically, we try to keep people on as short as we possibly can. And then it also has to do with the person. For example, I read a report this week that 80% of the people in New York City who were put on ventilators went on to die. 80%. So some doctors are like, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Now, it's very complicated to know because it may be that they're just giving the ventilators to the sickest of the sick who are going to die anyway, or some people, a few people are starting to think there's something about the ventilator that's doing something in the case of corona. We have no idea of why that statistic is so high in New York, and I'm not sure if it's the same in other places. Maybe Latanya knows, but this idea of is it a death sentence just because you get on a ventilator? No, a ventilator is generally there to help you get through a difficult time. For many people, it is able to do that. For some people, it's not.
Okay.
Did you
Just
want to
before
add to that, Naeem?
Doc.
Yes.
Wait. Before he adds to that, I wanted to. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Naeem. Go ahead.
I think Dr. Gibbons covered that well.
Okay. All right. I got to tell you, it's a scary thing that you hear about. I'm going to tell you, it's a scary thing. When you
Yeah.
talk about ventilators, it's a scary thing that you hear about. Another person just asked a question, and Latoya, I want to put this to you because it's about reinfection. It's about
Okay.
reinfection. Um, how likely, someone asked, is reinfection, and how can we prevent that as a person who has never been infected or has been infected and didn't know? Any thoughts to
So,
that?
sure. So I know that there are a couple of thoughts on this as it relates to reinfection. For COVID-19, it's unknown. So there's a lot of very unknown elements to this. But based upon how other respiratory viruses act, they're saying that, there might be an element of protectiveness that a person gets once they've been infected. Maybe if you're asymptomatic or had flu-blown disease that you need to be hospitalized. But we don't know how long that lasts. As also I read this week that there's small genetic changes that happen in any pathogen, and even the pathogen that was circulating, or the COVID-19 that circulated in the United States, was not actually the one that was in Wuhan, China, or China. It
That's
was
right.
actually a European variation.
That's
So
right.
there's of course variations in these pathogens. They mutate bacteria and viruses. They're really smart. They're very, very smart, and they change to accommodate to their circumstances. So there might be chances of reinfection. We don't know. I cannot say like, oh, you'll never get reinfected.
Hmm.
I do know that from the Chinese or Asian experience, people have been said that they've been shed in, or patients shed up to 37 days or so. But how viable those shed pieces are, we don't know. But that's my answer to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
just to add just a little, I read that there are actually 8 variations
Mhm.
of the coronavirus that are circulating globally now. 8 different strains of this variety of this virus that are out there.
Um, uh, Dr. Newman, I wanted to ask a question just concerning vaccines. Um, I have been asked plenty of times by people to write them a letter that we don't do vaccinations based on my religious affiliation. Now, the Seventh Day Adventist Church does not have that in our manuals or anything of that nature, but people will go to the furthest extent for them not to be vaccinated or for their children to be vaccinated. Um, you hear the president, I'm just saying, talk about vaccinations and things of that nature. Um, what should we be looking for? And is this the way to go? I see Latoya smiling a little bit over there. I don't know if he wants to defer, but what are your thoughts, Dr. Newman?
Um, that's again a great question. That is a great question. That is a tough question. That's a multifaceted question.
Mm,
Number one, do we trust vaccinations? I mean, that's underlying, kind of part of that question is, can we trust a vaccination? Are they going to put something on the vaccination that will injure me, that will hurt me, that will hurt my children? Um, I would say, as of right now, for this, we're probably, usually they have to run so many tests. It takes almost a year for a vaccine to be approved and things
ooh,
like that.
mercy.
So I don't know how soon we would be able to have a vaccination for something like this. I know they're testing some of the malaria medications and things like that now to see if there's any efficacy. Um, but vaccination, that is just such a vaccination. One thing we have to think about also, don't just help us; it helps others. So, for instance, vaccinations have wiped out whole diseases, but sometimes if someone chooses not to get vaccinated
You'll
and
bring it
gets
back.
that disease,
You'll bring
they
it
can
back
pass
again.
it on to
I
others.
see.
Um, Somebody else may have a more educated answer, because that's such a, I mean, it's a tough question. It's like, for instance, I get a lot of patients that come because I deal in cancer and say, hey, should I do this chemo? I hear chemo is going to do more damage to me than good. What should I do? And, again, these are very tough philosophical even questions.
Mm.
Well,
Thank you. I'm
I
sorry.
can add a little.
Okay.
There's some there's some real and real reasons why people believe the things they do that are partly misunderstandings. And so one is, for example, some people will take, let's say, the vaccine for the seasonal flu and then still end up getting the flu. So they say, oh, the vaccine is no good.
Mm.
Well, that's actually not the case. It looks like that, but that's not the case. What really happens, as Latoya was bringing out, we talked about earlier, there are actually several flus out there every year. Many of them don't cause much problems to humans, a few do. And we never know which one is going to be the most prevalent. So the vaccine that's made for this year is actually made to counteract the four most prevalent types of flu last year.
Mm.
So if it changes, as Latoya was saying, and they do change every single year, then you might have a flu that wasn't prevalent last year, and therefore the vaccine was not made against that one, become prevalent now, so that you get the vaccine and you still get a flu. It's actually not one of those four; it's a different one. But people think, oh, it didn't work, so why should I take it? But even those who do take it and get that other one, they tend to have less severe symptoms. That's one reason. Another reason, I'll just give you one more, is that vaccines are made in different ways. Sometimes a vaccine is taken, you take the very organism that causes the disease and you kill it, and then you use that to make the vaccine. Another way, you take the same vaccine, take the same organism, and you harm it a little bit. You not just inactivate it, you attenuate it. That just means you make it less harmful. And the reason for doing both of these in different ways is you can give it to the person, and then it doesn't. It causes the body to make the cells that will then be able to fight against it. In some people whose immune systems are not as strong, they can actually go on and get the disease from the vaccine or have very significant bad reactions. And there again, you have people say, well, I took the vaccine and had a seizure or had this other thing, and so vaccines are terrible. Those are all true things, but they don't mean vaccines are not effective at what they do. And then one last concept is that there are some people who refuse to take it and never get the disease that we're talking about. And that can be related to the fact that in a population of people, you get to a certain point that if most of the people are vaccinated, it's so hard for the disease to be transmitted. The last few that don't have it will never get it. But that doesn't mean it's not good for you and I shouldn't get it.
I
So just
understand.
add that.
I understand. Sister Latoya?
Oh, no, I think those were perfect points. The only thing I would add is that even with vaccines, as you can still get disease, may not be severe, but also a lessen. And also after time, vaccines wane. So that's why sometimes you have certain vaccines that you have to go back for a booster.
Right.
So just have to keep that in mind. So there's nothing that's foolproof. You just have to weigh all your decisions and make the best or more thoughtful decision that works for your health and where you are, like in your health journey.
Gotcha. Someone asked about just clarification. You talked about 8 different strains of, I'm sorry,
Of the
eight
of the
different strains of COVID-19 or coronavirus. Are they the same?
So not technically.
In fact,
So
let me just clear. 8 different strains of COVID-19 question mark or coronavirus. Just asking for clarification. Someone's just asking for clarification.
right. So let me be clear. Coronavirus is a type of virus. There are many siblings or brothers. There's many types of coronavirus that are already there.
Hmm.
There's just many. The seasonal flu H influenza is a coronavirus. It comes from that same family of virus. There are several others. That's why at first they call this, and some still call it, the new coronavirus that is similar, COVID-2, similar to SARS and MERS and some other things. This
Okay.
is a new member of a big family of viruses. That's the easy answer. There are as Latoya was saying, these many viruses, maybe all viruses, undergo changes in their genetics every year. We call it genetic drift. And we never know what these things are that are going to happen, but we follow them to make the vaccines. Every once in a while, um, a big change happens that makes it totally different, or a new virus is introduced. Those things are called genetic drift, or genetic shift,
Hmm.
or a brand new virus. We have in coronavirus a brand new virus. It's a good question. My understanding is that there are 8 strains of the COVID virus, the COVID-2 virus that's causing this right now. And each strain there's one that's prevalent in America, another one in Wuhan, China, another one in Africa, another at different places. Not like we have, at least based on what we know, all 8 right here.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, One of the reasons why I wanted to ask that is also you have individuals like Grace Taylor, who's on right now with us, who used to be an adult coordinator for vaccinations, and she's saying she's just agreeing that what you said, Dr. Gibbons, is absolutely correct. Plus, even new vaccines can be risky.
That's right.
That she's
That's right.
saying. So
That's
all
exactly right.
around it's been risky, and I love to listen to. I find Dr. Newman to be the kind of guy that when he speaks, he just speaks direct. But he was inching on his answer, and I I'm sorry, and I respect your inching on the answer. And thanks for being so bold about it. Also, in the meantime, this is so serious for us, especially for people who look at how do we inoculate ourselves. I used a big word. All right. But my mom made me a jar of something. I'm just okay. Made me a jar of something. I learned so much today in the 30 minutes that you guys were on. But my mom made a jar of something, and inside of it, it has garlic, ginger. She went Jamaican on me, straight hard Jamaican on me. Um, she put all kinds of stuff, honey, the whole nine, chopped up stuff, put it in there, and she's like, "You need to, take a spoonful of this twice every day." Yeah, I have. Um, I don't know if I'm attributing that to me being okay. You understand where I'm coming from, or all right now. But even for myself, I'm an asthmatic. But Doc, I stopped. When I say Doc, I'm sorry, Newman. I stopped. I don't eat dairy, so I don't have flare ups as often as I used to have 10 years ago. I don't eat cheese. Well, no, I'm sorry, that often. You know, I don't eat ice cream like I used to. You understand where I'm coming from? So there's definitely more of an immune to these things. Like right now, I had to take my inhaler and what have you because I cleaned out the garage. It was nothing but dust in there. So I'm sitting there, which is getting to my next question. I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh man, my chest is kind of hurt me right here. You know what I'm saying, or whatever. Um, and I know that I just cleaned out the garage with the dust in it because the day before that didn't happen. My question to you is, what are the tall tale signs? I know we talked about it before. There may be others online now. We have, over 70 something people on now, over 80 people who are on now, and maybe people were not here before. What are the tall tale signs where you begin to worry? I know we talked about it before. I know some of this is shortness of breath or this, that, and the other. What would it be? Because I'm going to ask Latoya if you do that, because Doc, I want to come back to you to talk a little bit about diet, if you don't mind, afterwards
Okay.
for another question. Latoya, if you will.
Sure. So the common ones for COVID-19, of course, fever, could be a low-grade fever. Of course, shortness of breath, a cough, a dry cough. And as mentioned, you have a feeling of you have a lack of taste or you can't smell. That's something that's come up with this virus. But for me, when I discuss this with the healthcare workers at my hospital, I say if you have a baseline, because it's allergy season, and this is beyond your baseline as it relates to like respiratory things,
Hmm.
then you should, be a little bit not worried, but you should be concerned and kind of follow up on that. Also, something I just want to mention with that, I know that if you have these symptoms, if they're not, and I kind of mentioned this morning that when to seek medical care, that's a very big thing. We do not want people just if you have like a fever to just rush to the hospital. The hospitals right now are very inundated with patients who are very, very sick. And maybe it wasn't COVID-19 that you have, but you went to the hospital and this can, you have an exposure. So if you can manage your symptoms, at home and do that without developing major illness, then you should do that. That's my answer.
One question again, Doc Newman. When is it absolutely necessary to see the doctor?
Um, I would say again, you don't want to wait to the last minute to see a doctor.
Okay.
So if you're having symptoms outside of your regular baseline day-to-day life, it's certainly worth it to at least call the doctor and discuss those symptoms with you and allow him to say this is a good um, time to come in or not to come in. I think it would be better to contact your doctor than to have to go to the ER and maybe be exposed to more people, because now a lot of doctors are doing telemedicine visits, meaning that using the Zoom platform, they're able to basically have a doctor's visit. So you actually don't have to contact anyone. So contacting your doctor right now may, once you have any of those symptoms, earlier is better than later.
I
And
got,
also, Pastor, I just was texted a question that I think is good for you to answer.
okay.
Um, it says, "Is it a test of Christian faith in allowing the government to stop us from assembling together in worship?"
No, 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 no. It's not a test of faith for us not to worship. It's a test of faith if they're asking us not to worship for spiritual reasons, not for health reasons. If there was a matter of a health reason, then we want to comply as much as we can with government or with our community But as it relates to spiritual reasons for not entering into the church or coming together, then it will be a test of faith. Um, I think that we need to be very careful. There were some individuals, even in the Bowie area, that had church. And when I mean have church, we had it with their um, congregation, but they were saying that God will take care of us, and we've got to be very careful that the test of faith is not testing God to see what He's going to do for you in your foolishness. It's the test of faith of what God is going to do for you while you are obeying laws. Even in when you look at the children of Israel, looking at in Leviticus, and you're looking at Deuteronomy. Um, I won't say quite numbers, but you will find that certain laws was given to Moses as it related to our health. And even there were quarantines that happened in those days. Sorry, ladies, but it's true. Okay. But even quarantine that it didn't only have to do with ladies, but also quarantine that had to do with behavior. You see where I'm coming from. But in light of this, my answer would be it is not a test of faith. It is not even. Now, let me be clear. What they have done is put a blue law into effect, but for health reasons, not for spiritual reasons. You understand where I'm coming from? We know that a blue law is that the government or the community leadership can put something in place that will alter your regular behavior. You see where I'm coming from? Um, so that answer would be no. Once it's spiritual, then it becomes a test of faith.
Yes.
um, I wanted to go back to another question. I pulled it up on my computer only because I couldn't read the whole thing from my phone. Oh, this was Yolanda Jackson asking if a person is in self isolation because of travel to a hotspot, but not but not showing any symptoms, is there anything they should do health wise? Drink more water, so and so. What would you say about that?
Who are you asking, Pastor?
Oh, I'm gonna Gibbons, Dr. Gibbons, please, if you will.
Sure. So all of the things that we talked about, the good thing about them, particularly the things that Dr. Newman talked about, they're good for COVID, but they're good for everything all the time, right? Whether you have it or not.
Okay,
So when you're in isolation because you're either coming from a region or you've had contact with somebody known to have it, continue doing the right things, continue eating properly, exercising properly, all those kinds of things until the 14-day period is over.
got you. What about Grace Taylor? Just said that. Of course, she's also a healthcare provider worker. Um, Keep checking your temperature. I noticed that at our daycare at our church, it is open for essential workers. Um, uh, um, I'm sorry, I just drew a blank. I don't know why. But Nadej Raphael, when I walk in there, because I only become essential when it's time to check up on the property. You understand where I'm coming from, or in light of things of that nature. But when I walk in there, there's strict rules that is that is for the daycare. Washing hands. Please go straight to the bathroom. Do so and so because of course the children are there, and what have you. Um, but what she has on there also is this device to put on your head, to check your temperature. Should we be always checking our temperature? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The answer is yes. Well, I believe the answer is yes. Grace Taylor has said that we ought to be always checking our temperature because of the baseline. Because of the baseline to see if we should pass the baseline. Um, so again, we should have maybe we should have had Grace on there because everything y'all saying, she's saying yes, this is right, this is true, this is so and so, what have you. So we recognize that there is no real treatment for it. Do we run the course? Is that it? I'm just asking that. Is that it? We run the course?
As of right now, there are no approved treatments for COVID. There are, and people sometimes confuse the vaccine with treatment. Even when we have a vaccine, that's not a treatment for those who have it now,
Mm,
right?
mm.
That will hopefully prevent people in the future or at least lower their risk of getting it. But as of right now, there's no treatment for the virus itself. What we are doing and because many hospitals are overwhelmed, you don't even get admitted until you're very, very ill. They're treating the symptoms. So if you have difficulty breathing, they're trying to help you breathe better. If you have a fever, they're trying to bring your fever down,
Mhm.
those kinds of things. But those kinds of things by themselves don't do anything to the virus.
We have a Lisa that is has a question here from New York. This question is, what are the requirements for being? And this is our last question, if you don't mind. If there's a last question, we have another program coming up at 5 o'clock, and I'm also excited for that. What are the requirements? And maybe each of us can answer that question, or what have you. But what are the requirements for being cleared to be discharged from the hospital by doctors after being treated for COVID?
Well, I'll take a stab. That's interesting. Right now, at least at the hospital that I'm affiliated with, they are overwhelmed. They're absolutely overwhelmed, and only those who are the sickest of the sick are getting treated. So even if you test positive, but you have mild symptoms or no symptoms at all, you're not going to get admitted. You're going back home and being told to isolate.
Mm,
And so, and so the criteria for getting out of the hospital, because so many people need to get in, is can you survive outside the hospital essentially? And as soon as you can survive out of the hospital, not that you're cured, you're sent back home. And then in certain cases, we may need to do things to enable healthcare workers to visit your home or take care of you from home, but trying to free up as many beds for those with severe disease. That may be different at other hospitals.
gotcha.
Yes,
Latoya, if you will.
yes, so yes, and that's the same guidelines at our hospital. We've had patients who came in, tested positive. If they're able to, again, be able to be at home and take care of themselves appropriately, self-isolate, and there's no serious other medical issues happening, then we don't want you in the hospital. Because
Hmm.
we want the sickest of the sick, because we have to take care of those patients. We have made more intensive care beds to take care of the sickest of the sick. So the people that are in the hospital are sickest of the sick. If you're mildly ill, you still have the virus, but you can be home and self quarantine.
Gotcha. Doc, if you will.
Yeah, I would say it's even tough to get a test
Yeah,
for most people
right.
because you have to be exhibiting symptoms because there just aren't enough tests to test everybody who would want to be tested. So we're still working on a test. And just recently, over the last couple of weeks, our hospital got the rapid test. Before that, the test was taking 4 days to come back.
Wow.
Just over the last few weeks, they have a rapid test where you can get the results in 45 minutes to an hour.
Wow. That's I'm learning so much. I'm learning so much because a lot of people ask me questions as a pastor, recognizing that I don't have all the answers. I don't know all the answers. I don't like watching CNN for my answers. I don't like watching Fox News for my answers. I just want to be clear. Um, so it's good to hear it um, from here. I'm going to ask the three of you a question. I just got a text from my administrator, Mike Dorch, who says you have 15 minutes left. So I would like to hear from uh, first from Latoya, if you will, ladies first. If what kind of advice would you give a Paul Graham who is a layman who's going out to get something uh, to um, to to eat to Home Depot, um, to Target? What would your advice be? Just what would your advice be for me, Doc? I'm coming to the both of you with another last two questions. Go ahead.
And just for me, it's always hand hygiene. That's always the number one way to prevent the spread of infection. Hand hygiene. Always wash your hands. If you're touching something, you're washing your hands using the hand sanitizer. Also, keeping that social distance. This is not a time to develop new habits of going outside if you don't need to be outside. So staying at home, staying hunkering down until we get beyond this. And also just staying healthy. You don't want to make sure that we're decreasing your comorbidities, making sure that you're staying healthy, both mentally, physically, and emotionally as much as possible. Those are my biggest advice to anyone.
Got you, Valerie. Valerie, I'm just going to say her first name. Asked this question for this last question for you, Dr. Gibbons. Um, it says here, should my husband, who is an ER nurse, self isolate when he gets home, seeing at least 10 COVID patients per week?
Mhm.
Well, I'll say at this point, the recommendations for somebody, for a healthcare worker who has no symptoms, is not to directly self-isolate. I would say be very careful. As Latoya alluded to earlier, it's probably a good idea when they come home to take those clothes off immediately and put them in the wash, to take a shower and clean yourself very carefully. But at this time, there's no recommendation for entirely asymptomatic healthcare workers when they go back home to self isolate. Now, if they test positive or if they start showing symptoms, that's an entirely different story.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I had one last question for the doc, but I'm trying to find this person's question. Just give me one moment here.
While you're looking for it, I
Sure.
just want to thank you, Pastor, for your leadership. We know that during a lot of our history as Black Americans, the church was the disseminator of information.
Definitely.
So we should be able to come to the church to get information. About you organizing a platform like this, you provided what the church should be doing, a disseminator of information that has to do not just with the information, but what does it mean for us as Christians and spiritually. And I
Gotcha.
also just want to thank Dr. Gibbons and Latoya for doing such a great job and for being willing to put their time in and preparing for their presentations.
Thank you so much. In fact, this last question, I think it was answered, and she said, "Forgive me if I missed the question, but if Paul Graham has contracted it, okay, what do I do at this very moment um, to slow down my deterioration. Number one, I think what I heard, I'm gonna answer based on everything that I've heard today. I'm gonna try it, okay? And please, if I mess it up, you know what to do. Um, First of all, thank you, Doc. Doc, I appreciate that affirmation. Here's the question. Here's the answer. The answer to that is that I will, if I know that I have it. Number one, I'm going to isolate myself, even in my home. If I have it, if I'm going to slow it down, I still have to find a way to exercise, find a way to eat, still eat properly. I'm still taking my fluids. What I would have done to prevent it, I'm going to have to do it now. Eat the right foods. Uh, Wash my hands still. Um, Wash my hands. Not put my hands on my face, just to be mindful that what you're doing to prevent it, you still have to do it if you have it, and let it run its course. um how did I do?
Not bad, not bad.
You did excellent.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
You did
um
excellent. You know, the one thing that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. God made us to fight these viruses. Gave us a
Yes.
diet to
Yes.
help us. The
Yes.
reason we even get a fever with these viruses is that that's the body trying to kill the virus.
oh,
So,
mercy.
if you have the virus or contract the virus, the best thing you can do is to boost up your immune system with all the things we've been talking about. Your mental health. Don't get down on yourself and get depressed. And go out for walks. Keep a positive attitude. Keep your mind stayed on
Yes.
Jesus.
Yes. Yes.
Dr. Gibbons sent me a great verse this morning, Psalm 55:22. It's a great one to hold on to, but it reminds us that God cares for us, and the righteous have never been
Been
forsaken.
forsaken. Amen.
So it is doing those things, eating your oranges, drinking the turmeric and the ginger and the teas, and doing all of that to allow your body to fight back. Because essentially, for viruses, there are not antibiotics or medications that will kill viruses. Our body is going to have to take up the task of killing most viruses.
Listen, I want to thank the three of you for enlightening me, enlightening us. Again, Doc, we're going to do this again next week, but our mental health in
Yes,
this whole
the mental
situation.
health impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Definitely. Thank you again. Thank you again. I just want to give an announcement to everyone at 5 o'clock. We will be meeting again in this fashion. We have our Centered Praise Easter Special Edition. We're inviting everyone to come back. We have great music, great music. I want to thank our ministers of music at Restoration Praise Center for providing this for us, especially in our Vespers time. I'm hoping that we received a great information. Well, first of all, we received great information. What I'm hoping is that we would heed to the information that has been given. I just want to, wherever we are, that we'll bow our heads for prayer, thanking God for the opportunity to understand more about who He is in our lives. Father, again, we want to thank you for all that you've done. We want to thank you for life and for strength and the opportunity of hearing this information so that we will live out this information. The word is given that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and it's because you have done this. Now, so many people have passed, and so many people are hurting over this. But what we can do, Lord, is trust in you more than ever before. We want you to know that we love you and we appreciate you being the God of our lives. And until then, we follow the creed of taking care of our bodies, being a living sacrifice for you. So strengthen us and be with us, we ask. I ask that you be with Dr. Newman, that you be with Dr. Gibbons, and you be with Sister Latoya Forrester in such a way that you will bless them for blessing us. In Jesus' name, amen. Be blessed, everyone. Take care now.